My girlfriend of 3 years told me I was too sensitive after she deliberately humiliated me at her birthday party, claiming she was just being honest when she mocked my insecurities in front of everyone. What she didn't know was that her cruel honesty was about to backfire spectacularly when I decided to be equally honest about the real reason I'd been distant lately. Hey viewers, welcome to the channel. We are just starting and your support means a lot. If you enjoy these stories, please consider subscribing and help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers. My name is Jake Morrison. I'm 28 years old, and for 3 years I believed I was in love with the most manipulative woman I've ever met. Elena Rodriguez was 26 when we met, a stunning marketing executive with an Instagram-perfect smile and the kind of confidence that drew people to her like moths to a flame. I was completely smitten from day one. She had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room when she focused on you, but I learned too late that this was just another tool in her arsenal of manipulation. The beginning was intoxicating. Elena showered me with attention, made me feel special, chosen. She'd text me constantly, surprise me with little gifts, and introduce me to her friends as her amazing boyfriend Jake. I thought I'd won the lottery. I was a quiet software developer who preferred books to parties, and here was this vibrant, social butterfly who somehow wanted to be with me. But slowly, so gradually I didn't notice at first, things began to change. The constant texting became checking up on me. The surprises became tests of my devotion. The introductions to friends became opportunities for her to highlight my shortcomings with a laugh that was supposed to make it okay. "Oh, Jake's so shy, he barely talks when we go out," she'd say with that perfect smile, while I stood there feeling like I was shrinking into the floor. Elena had this particular talent for making her cruelty sound like caring. "I'm just trying to help you improve yourself, baby," she'd say after pointing out that I was too quiet at dinner, or that my shirt didn't fit right, or that I was being too sensitive when her jokes at my expense hit too close to home. Somehow, she always made me feel like the problem was with me, not with her behavior. The gaslighting was masterful, really. When I'd try to express that something she said hurt my feelings, she'd twist it around until I was apologizing for being oversensitive. "I love you exactly as you are," she'd say, "but that doesn't mean I can't want you to be the best version of yourself." And somehow, her version of my best self always involved me changing everything about who I was. My friends started expressing concern. My best friend Marcus, who's 29 and has known me since college, pulled me aside multiple times. "Dude, she's changing you," he'd say. "You used to be confident. Now you second-guess everything you say." But I was so deep in Elena's web that I'd defend her, telling Marcus he just didn't understand our relationship. The beginning of the end started about 4 months before her birthday party. I'd been working late on a project, and Elena had been unusually understanding about my long hours. She'd even encouraged me to focus on work, saying she was proud of how dedicated I was. I should have known something was up. Elena was never understanding about anything that took attention away from her. One evening, I finished earlier than expected and decided to surprise her with dinner from her favorite restaurant. I used my key to let myself into her apartment, calling out that I was there. No answer. I figured she might be in the shower or on a call, so I went to the kitchen to set up the food. That's when I heard it. Voices from her bedroom. Elena's voice and a man's voice I didn't recognize. My blood turned to ice as I realized what I was hearing. The sounds were unmistakable. Elena was cheating on me, and she wasn't even trying to be quiet about it. I stood there in her kitchen for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, holding bags of Thai food and feeling my entire world collapse around me. Part of me wanted to storm into the bedroom and confront them. Part of me wanted to just leave and never come back. But there was a third part, a part I'd never really acknowledged before, that wanted to know exactly what I was dealing with. So I waited. I put the food in the refrigerator, sat on her couch, and waited. About an hour later, I heard movement, then the front door opening and closing. Then Elena appeared in the living room, looking perfectly put together as always, and stopped dead when she saw me. "Jake, baby, you're early," she said, and the speed with which she composed herself was almost impressive. "I was just taking a nap." "Really?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Funny, I could have sworn I heard voices." Her eyes didn't even flicker. "Oh, that was probably the TV. You know how thin these walls are." She came over and kissed my cheek like nothing had happened. "Did you bring dinner?" That was the moment I realized exactly what kind of person Alina really was. Not just a cheater, but someone who could lie to my face without the slightest hesitation or guilt. Someone who could gaslight me even when we both knew the truth. But instead of confronting her right then, I made a decision that would change everything. I decided to gather evidence, not for a dramatic confrontation, but because I needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. How long had this been going on? Who was he? Was there more than one? Over the next few weeks, I became a detective in my own relationship. I started paying attention to Alina's patterns, her phone habits, her schedule. I noticed that her work dinners always seemed to be on the same nights. I noticed that she'd become protective of her phone in a way she never had been before. I noticed that she was suddenly very understanding about giving me space, encouraging me to hang out with my friends or work late. I hired a private investigator. I know how that sounds, but I needed to know the truth. What I discovered was worse than I'd imagined. Alina wasn't just having an affair, she was having multiple affairs. The PI gave me photos, timestamps, hotel receipts. She had a rotation of at least 3 different men, and from what I could piece together, this had been going on for over a year. But the worst part wasn't the cheating itself. It was the realization of how calculated it all was. Alina had been systematically breaking down my self-esteem and confidence while she explored her options. She'd made me feel like I was lucky to have her, like I needed to constantly prove my worth, while she was shopping around for someone better. The evidence I gathered painted a picture of a woman who saw relationships as a game to be won. In the photos, she looked happier with these other men than she ever did with me. She laughed more, smiled more genuinely, seemed more relaxed. It was like seeing a completely different person, and I realized that the Alina I thought I knew had never really existed. I spent weeks sitting on this information, trying to decide what to do with it. I could have confronted her immediately, but something held me back. Maybe it was the 3 years I'd invested, or maybe I just needed time to process the magnitude of her betrayal. Alina continued to act like the perfect girlfriend, even as my PI continued to document her activities. Then came her 27th birthday party. Alina had been planning this party for months, talking about it constantly. She'd invited about 30 people to a trendy rooftop bar downtown, and she'd made it clear that this was going to be the social event of the season. She'd picked out my outfit, coached me on what to say to her friends, and reminded me multiple times not to be too quiet, because it would reflect poorly on her. The party was everything Alina had planned it to be. The venue was gorgeous, the decorations were perfect, and all her friends showed up dressed to impress. I played my part perfectly, smiling and making small talk, letting Alina show me off as her devoted boyfriend. For most of the evening, I managed to push thoughts of the evidence sitting in my apartment to the back of my mind. But then Alina had a few too many drinks, and her mask started to slip. It started small. She made a joke about how I'd worn the wrong tie initially, and she'd had to fix it. Then she laughed about how I'd been so nervous about meeting her work friends, even though I'd met them several times before. Each comment got a little sharper, a little more pointed. Her friends laughed along, but I could see some of them looking uncomfortable. My friend Marcus, who'd come to support me, was shooting me looks that said, "Just leave." But I stayed, partly out of loyalty to Alina and partly because I was curious to see how far she'd go. The breaking point came when Alina's coworker Jessica, who's 25 and had always seemed nice enough, made an innocent comment about how sweet it was that I'd surprised Alina with flowers earlier that day. I had surprised her with flowers, and she'd seemed genuinely pleased at the time. But Alina, emboldened by alcohol and the attention of her audience, decided to turn even that gesture into ammunition. "Oh, Jake's always doing stuff like that," she said with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "He's so insecure that he needs constant validation. Like he literally can't handle it if I don't text him back within an hour. It's honestly kind of exhausting." The conversation around us quieted. Even Alina's friends seemed taken aback by the cruelty in her voice, but she wasn't done. "And don't even get me started on how sensitive he is," she continued, looking right at me with that perfect smile. "Like if I make one tiny joke about anything, he gets all hurt and mopey. I keep telling him he needs to toughen up if he wants to make it in the real world." I felt heat rise in my cheeks as 30 people stared at me, waiting to see how I'd respond. This was Alina at her worst, using my vulnerabilities as entertainment for her friends. The same insecurities she'd claimed to love about me, The same sensitivity she'd said made me special was now being used to humiliate me in public. Marcus started to move toward me, probably planning to suggest we leave, but I held up a hand to stop him. Because in that moment, sitting there while Alina eviscerated me for the amusement of people who barely knew me, I realized something important. I was done being her victim. I stood up slowly, and the conversations around us died completely. Alina looked up at me expectantly, probably thinking I was going to slink away in embarrassment like I usually did when she went too far. Instead, I smiled. Not a hurt smile or a fake smile, but a genuine, peaceful smile. "You're absolutely right, Alina," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the rooftop. "I am sensitive. I'm sensitive enough to notice when someone I love is lying to me. I'm sensitive enough to pick up on patterns of behavior. I'm sensitive enough to know when someone is manipulating me." Alina's smile faltered slightly, but she tried to maintain her composure. "Jake, what are you?" "I'm sensitive enough," I continued, reaching into my jacket pocket, "to notice when my girlfriend starts working late 3 nights a week at the exact same times. I'm sensitive enough to wonder why she suddenly needs so much space. I'm sensitive enough to hire a private investigator when something doesn't feel right." The silence on the rooftop was deafening. Alina had gone completely pale, but she was still trying to play it off. "Jake, you're being ridiculous. You're embarrassing yourself." I pulled out my phone and opened the folder of photos the PI had sent me. "Am I?" I asked, and held up the screen so she could see the image of her and a tall, dark-haired man I didn't recognize entering a hotel together just 2 days ago. Alina's perfect composure finally cracked. "Where did you get that?" she whispered. "I got it from being too sensitive," I said, and I could hear the strength in my own voice, a strength I hadn't felt in months. "Too sensitive to ignore my instincts. Too sensitive to let you continue making me feel crazy for noticing that something was wrong." I looked around at the faces watching us, some shocked, some sympathetic, some clearly enjoying the drama. Alina likes to say I'm too sensitive, but I think sensitivity is actually a strength. It helps you notice when someone who claims to love you is systematically tearing down your self-worth while they explore their other options. Alina tried one more time to regain control. "Jake, can we please talk about this privately? You're making a scene." But I was far from done. "You know what's interesting about being sensitive?" I asked, scrolling through more photos on my phone. "You notice details, like how you're always tired on Thursday mornings, or how you suddenly started going to that new gym across town, or how you've been encouraging me to work late and hang out with friends more often." I showed her another photo. "This is you with Gym Guy." "That's what I call him anyway, since I never got his name. This was taken last Thursday while I was working late because you said you needed space to focus on your projects." Alina was openly crying now, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of someone who'd been caught and was angry about it. "You had me followed," she hissed. "That's psychotic, Jake." "Is it?" I asked calmly. "Or is it what someone does when they're being systematically lied to and made to feel crazy about their own perceptions? You want to talk about psychotic behavior, Alina? Let's talk about spending a year making me feel like I was losing my mind while you maintained relationships with multiple other men." The crowd was completely silent now. Even the servers had stopped moving around. Alina's birthday party had become the Jake and Alina show, and for the first time in 3 years, I was the one in control of the narrative. "Here's what's really interesting," I said, putting my phone away. "All this time, you've been telling me I need to be less sensitive, less emotional, tougher. But the truth is, my sensitivity is what saved me. It's what helped me realize that the problem wasn't with me being too much of anything. The problem was with you being a liar and a manipulator who gets off on making people feel small." Alina stood up abruptly, knocking over her chair. "I don't have to listen to this," she said, but her voice was shaking. "No, you don't," I agreed. "But everyone else here does. And they should know what kind of person throws someone a birthday party while they're sleeping with 3 other people. They should know what kind of person systematically destroys someone's confidence while pretending to love them." I turned to address the room directly. "I'm sorry for disrupting the party, everyone. I know this isn't what you came here for, but I wanted you to know the truth about who Alina really is, since she's so big on honesty." Alina was backing toward the exit now, mascara running down her face. "You're insane, Jake. You've lost your mind." "Maybe," I said with a shrug. "But at least I'm not a cheating liar who gets off on psychological manipulation. I'd rather be crazy than cruel." As Alina fled the rooftop, her perfect party collapsing around her, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: peace. Not satisfaction exactly, and not revenge, but a deep, profound relief. The weight of her constant gaslighting, her subtle cruelties, her systematic erosion of my self-worth, all of it lifted at once. Marcus appeared at my side. "Holy shit, man," he said quietly. "Are you okay?" I looked around the rooftop at the faces staring at me, some shocked, some clearly on my side, some probably thinking I was the villain in this story. And for the first time in 3 years, I didn't care what anyone else thought. "Yeah," I said, and meant it completely. "I'm more than okay, I'm free." The aftermath was swift and brutal for Alina. Word spread through her social circle within days. Her carefully curated image as the perfect girlfriend couldn't survive the truth about her behavior. Several people reached out to me privately, admitting they'd always thought something was off about how she treated me but hadn't known how to say anything. Alina tried to control the damage, telling people I was stalking her and that the photos were somehow fake or taken out of context. But the truth has a way of holding up under scrutiny, and her lies didn't. 3 months later, I'm in therapy working through the psychological damage of being in a relationship with someone who systematically tore down my self-esteem. I'm learning to trust my instincts again, to value my sensitivity as the strength it actually is, rather than the weakness Alina convinced me it was. I haven't spoken to Alina since the party, and I have no desire to. I heard through mutual friends that she's moved to another city, probably to start fresh where people don't know her story. I wish her well, genuinely. I hope she gets the help she needs to stop hurting people. As for me, I'm rebuilding. I'm remembering who I was before Alina spent 3 years convincing me I was too much and not enough at the same time. I'm learning that sensitivity, emotional intelligence, and the ability to notice patterns aren't flaws to be fixed. They're gifts that helped me recognize manipulation and ultimately save myself from a relationship that was slowly destroying me. The best revenge, it turns out, wasn't humiliating Alina at her own party. It was reclaiming my truth and refusing to let her rewrite our story. It was standing up and saying, clearly and calmly, that I deserved better than to be someone's emotional punching bag. I deserved honesty, respect, and love that didn't come with conditions or constant criticism. And now I know I'll never settle for less again.